Hello, this is Brian Arnold, and thinking about standards in physical education. Something that I've done for many years, and what it really boils down to is three main standards when we think about PE or physical education and health. And the first one is, what is it you put in your body? The second one is how to use your body, and the third one is how to maintain it so that it works for you better than you work for it. So I want to look at this kind of like in an interview format, where I'm going to actually have my wife, Renee, ask me the questions and then answer them throughout this interview process, and so that we can get to the bottom of some of these questions. So what was the first question you have for me?
Well, the first set of questions falls under students.
Mm-hmm.
First question is, do we expect all students to achieve all the standards? Why or why not? And who makes this decision?
Gotcha. Well, I would say in that, yes, absolutely. PE is one of those, or exercise or health, or one of those things that last for our entire life. You know, from the time that we start school until the time that we actually pass away, we are having to interact with nutrition and what's best to be put into our body. We're interacting with our bodies and making sure that they work and use it. And finally, if the standard is, how do we make it for optimal performance? And we can look through that through all of our lives. You know, there's people who walk, there's people who jog, there's people, and hopefully they learn these skills while they're in their PE classes and actually how to use it. So what I'd say, do I expect all students to learn how to do this? 100% absolutely yes. Why or why not? Because the better our bodies work, the better they work for us, the longer longevity and happiness in life that is there. And so, who makes the decision? I think, through the curriculum, through what we've been taught as physical educators, we get to make our own decisions. A lot of times in our own profession. As a PE teacher, sometimes I've been the only PE teacher at the school. I get to make the decisions, what the kids learn. But overall, as we look at national standards, you think of somebody like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who put out different standards and different levels of fitness that were available for every kid everywhere to be able to achieve, and kind of set those benchmarks that allow us to know exactly how kids are doing. When we're talking about body fat, or we're talking about, their ability to do how many pull-ups or push-ups or sit-ups, those types of things.
Okay, the next question is, what academic intervention, if any, will be provided to students who fail to meet the standards?
Well, that is really interesting, because there's a lot of folks that are kids or students when they think about K through 12 who are not able to do push-ups or not able to do sit-ups, or who are not eating right because of, maybe their family or where they grew up didn't have the right nutritional needs that were there. And so you just have to be patient, because I think everybody at every place, even if it moves into adaptive physical education, you think of people who are handicapped in some way, or have disabilities, or maybe missing a limb or something like that. There's always something somebody can do. And then when we start talking about nutrition and eating and making sure you're putting the right stuff in your body, there are folks that fall behind. And it's with that patient and those interventions. And, there's some testing that's involved, but more than anything, if we could create good habits. I know, it's been understood that it takes 21 days to create a habit. And so if we can create these habits that are long-lasting, lifelong physical education, lifelong exercise, lifelong nutritional needs, and keep promoting that and keep talking about it every single year, I think we can get people up to speed.
Okay, what are some potential effects standardized education may have on students?
What are some what?
What are some potential effects standardized education may have on students?
So, well, one thing is we're in a society that loves to compare. And when we think about, these standards, the standards that we meet are minimal standards for somebody to be healthy. When we look at our healthcare system and how much our healthcare system is affected by people that don't have the right nutrition, or don't have the right healthy habits, or don't do the exercising, and how much money is spent, millions and millions of dollars. You think of the industry that is exercise, and the last statistic that I read was over $1 trillion is spent every year on exercising or exercise equipment and gyms and everything else that we do. And for the people who actually engage in keeping themselves healthy, again, that quality of life is better, that enjoyment is better, the things that they're able to do seems to be better, and the overall lifespan is extended as a result. And so when we think about academically and things that we have to do to make sure that we meet the needs of every single child, every single student throughout their entire school, knowing that this is something we're trying to put into practice throughout somebody's life.
Cool. Next section's on teachers. There's two parts to this question. What does literature say about teacher perceptions of the teaching, learning, assessment process, and how does one change teachers' beliefs about the teaching, learning, assessment process if it does not align with the standards?
That's a lot in there.
It is.
That you read.
I can do the first part again
Please.
if you'd like. What does literature say about teacher perceptions of the teaching, learning, assessment process?
Well, when we're looking at on the physical education side, which is a little bit different than the academic side, where, teachers' perceptions of, is this necessary? Do we need to have standards? Are the standards really working? When you move on to the physical education side and you look at the literature and what is said, there's very few dissensions on the need for health education, on the need for physical education, on the need to understanding our bodies, on the need to making our bodies better. It's not something that everybody likes to do all the time, but very rarely have I found somebody who has said or even read something that has said these items are not necessary. What happens, though, is one of the things that we find in literature a lot is the fact that where is the time for physical education? Is this something that the parents should be doing? Is this something that society should be doing? Should it be extracurricular activities like sports and things that teaches this, because we don't want to take time out of the classroom? It's one of the first things that goes when students are falling behind. We take away sometimes their recess, or we take sometimes away a PE class, or we think that learning about their bodies isn't as important as maybe some of the mental or academic type things that happen. And so that's what we find in literature a lot is seeing that those items where physical education we know is important is not as important or down the totem pole because it is simple to what are those standards are. How do you make your body work better? What do you put into your body, and how do you optimize your body to work better? Those things can take time, but sometimes we don't see those as important as somebody's ability to read or to write or to do math or to be able to do those things that will give them the jobs that they need.
So how does one change teachers' beliefs about that teaching, learning, assessment process if it doesn't align with the standards?
Yeah, and we think about the standards. I don't think it's about changing people's beliefs at all. I think it's about changing people's ability to get it done. We all have these timers, we all have these things on our watches that we have on that tell us we know that we're supposed to go exercise, we know that we're supposed to go out for a walk, but we let other things take. So I don't know if it's a perception of changing what we do or how we assess it. I think it's more a perception of how do we convince people this is so important to get it done. We all know what we're supposed to eat. We all know what we're supposed to put in our bodies as fuel that burns and how that works. And maybe, as we're teaching that to kids and our health portion of it, how do we emphasize that in a better way so that people will eat better?
What are some ways we can help teachers understand the written standards and the implications for their teaching?
Understanding the written standards in physical education, I think, are some things that we have to do a lot of demonstration. If the standard says that each student should be able to do 10 push-ups, okay, I don't think we need to understand what that means. We all know what 10 push-ups is. But how do we get a child or an adult even to be able to do 10 push-ups is a whole nother thing. And so understanding those standards, and the PE is not, or health is these standards are not like rocket science that we're trying to figure out, or something that's super hard to learn. It might be something that's hard to do. So understanding what those exactly are. If we need a jump rope for 60 seconds and every student needs to be able to do that as a standard that says you are at third grade, you are able to have enough hand-eye coordination to be able to jump This is just an example of a standard. You need to be able to jump or at the jump rope for 60 seconds, all by yourself. If that is the standard, now how do I teach that? Do we start with jump roping over it for 5 seconds and then 10 seconds? Do we start learning what a jump roper is and how to do a jump rope? Those are all things that those standards are sometimes are easy to achieve, but not simple. And when I say that is that hand-eye coordination is how your body works, right? And not everybody's body works the way that they think that they should, depending on what parents did with them from grade. Just like in regular math, if kids didn't get that education on counting and that kind of stuff before they got to kindergarten, it's a little bit harder. They're the same thing. If all we did is have the kids sit in front of watch Sesame Street for 5 years, then jumping rope is going to be something that's tough.
What steps can be taken to ensure curriculum is not solely focused on teaching to the tests?
Well, PE is pretty easy. We just want you to have fitness for life. It's not about how we do on the test. It's about how you do on a daily basis.
What support can be given during the process of teachers becoming more autonomous?
For PE, teachers are pretty autonomous in the first place with being able to do. And if they're meeting the standards and they're checking out the kids and we're doing pretty good, there's not a lot that needs to happen. Just some willing teachers who are willing to spend that time. I just met with a PE teacher the other day. He was playing cornhole, a game that we love to play as adults, sitting out there in a field and letting the kids toss the beanbags and let them get that opportunity to be able to do it.
Okay, the next section's on assessment. How is students' progress toward achieving the standards reported?
Well, that's pretty easy in PE. We're reporting, and we know the standards. The standards are written down, and once a semester or twice a semester, we go through and see where every student's at. What do? You sit down and say, how many sit-ups can you do in 60 seconds? So you have the kids pair up, and then they do sit-ups. So it's pretty easy taking these tests, this assessment.
What changes, if any, need to take place regarding school, district, and state assessments? And provide some rationale for your suggestions.
One more time.
What changes need to take place, if any, regarding school, district, and state assessments?
There isn't a state assessment for PE. And really there's not a district one. There's a national assessment that we can do. The big thing to make sure that we're doing it, at least in this world, is that it's being done and there's time to do it. The biggest problem that I found for making sure that the tests are done in physical education is if, like when I was teaching in elementary school, for example, I would get the kids for 20 minutes, not enough time to do a full assessment. And so there needs to be a time at least once a quarter to be able to spend that time, go through the assessment and be able to track. And we should do a much better job of tracking through the whole 12 grades if we're doing K through 12 and be able to follow those along. So somebody who's in 12th grade, teacher should be able to see the assessment from 2nd or 3rd grade and see how that child has progressed.
How do states, districts, and schools assess whether students have achieved the standards at different levels?
In PE, like I said, I just mentioned that, we should be able to use databases and make sure that we're plugging into the same software of where a kid is and where a child is and where they're able to go to.
And second part on that, what measures of accountability should be taken?
For all teachers, when we talk about accountability, the teachers should have the accountability of making sure that those are put in. Whether they're part of the grading system, I don't know if it needs to be, but at least if those tests are put into the database.
Will national or district tests give the United States a barometer for determining how well schools are doing and provide valuable information about which students need additional assistance?
Absolutely. In PE, we can see exactly what a student would need throughout with those standards, and I think those standards, the national physical education standards, are perfect, and we should be testing on those as we have time and being able to help students get through that. I mean, ultimately the goal is it's lifelong. And so we need to make sure that we're making sure that we're helping students be able to understand that.
Okay, the last section is on standards and benchmarks. What is the goal of standardization and benchmarking at each of the following levels: elementary, secondary, and higher education?
It's just to see where our students at. You know, we need to benchmark, you know, quickly as fast as we can. This is where you should be at by second grade. This is where you should be by 10th grade, and then be able to test it and see. We can kind of tell the health of a person by the time that they're seniors too. You know, have they been healthy? Is this stuff working?
Who sets the standards?
Standards are set by, you know, I guess for PE, it's in an individual spot. There are national standards that are out there, but each physical education teacher works on the practice of making us with those shared goals.
At what levels will benchmarks be written?
I think benchmarks should be written at elementary, then middle school, and then high school.
Last question is, what's the most appropriate format for publishing standards, taking into account that the curriculum is dynamic and changes will be made, especially regarding the benchmarks?
I think the benchmark should be posted online, and if we can do nationals, that's great. If we can only do statewide, that's great. With P, it's pretty simple. We know what kids need. We know what we need. We know what's important, and so those benchmarks can be posted internet. They can be changed internet. It's not necessarily how things are being done. It's that they are being done, which is important.
That's the end of the questions.
Well, thank you. And so hopefully we've answered all those questions, and we've done it right in the right amount of time. Thank you for your time today.